Good morning. It's nice to see you all. I'm here with two amazing leaders from an HR perspective from different organizations who've been through the journey. Some are a little more fresh and out of it than others. But we very much would like to share some of the experiences and the things that they have, not just with Oracle, but in leading their organizations through the change that is inevitable and important as part of this. Because very few people actually say, I need some new software. It's always tied to something, either a problem, outcomes, value, things that people need. So just a quick introduction on me. So my name's Jeff Greenberg. I run our US business at PwC for HCM. I've been doing this work, my picture might indicate this, but I've been doing this work for a very long time, for about 30 years. And for a lot of organizations, focused a lot in healthcare, with my colleagues here do, and they'll introduce themselves. And so we feel it's really important to be able to share those experiences and help you guys understand the things that really come with this and some things to think about, hopefully, as you go through your own journey or reflect on your own. So, Tracy, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tracy Nordberg. I'm the Chief People Officer for LifePoint Health, which is a large healthcare system across the U.S. We have 130 hospitals in the acute, rehab, and behavioral health space, 55,000 employees. So quite a big organization, and we actually just finished our third and final wave of Go Live with Oracle in partnership with PwC. Our last 75 sites, 75 hospitals went live on October 1st. So it has been a real journey, a very, and I won't do it much more than this and I'll hand it over, but from speed, from cost, from complexity, very, very high level, having been maybe my fourth implementation, I think so.
Good morning. I'm Carissa Weens, VP HR Operations at University Wisconsin Health System, and we're located in Madison, and then we have a Northern Illinois region. And so we were integrating with the Northern Illinois region, and we went live with them just this past July. So just for some context, we are about 25,000 employees, about 4,000 of those are in Northern Illinois and the rest are in Madison, Wisconsin. So we were actually integrating academic medical center with a community practice, which brings its own unique challenges.
Right. So Carissa just mentioned that they're working on integrating a different part of the organization and trying to bring everybody together. So maybe the first question for you all is to talk a little bit about what you were seeking: outcomes, value, problems. So why don't you share with the folks in the audience the things that you were really trying to achieve, what the organization was looking for, and hopefully get a better understanding of how, as we start to talk about the technology and the things, how that all helped and assisted with that.
So our project was really around integration and bringing together the system to become one UW Health. So I would say that's the problem that we were really looking to solve. We did that through technology, people and process. And I think, our outcomes, it's still early. We're about 90 days post go live, but one of the big challenges we were having was around data and having one source of truth. So our Northern Illinois region was on a very antiquated software, and we needed to modernize the HR function and really look at having better data so we could get better insights.
Yeah, I think the theme of integration is the same, and that is for us, we had acquired several organizations, which meant we really needed to get them off of different payroll, HR, financial systems. We did the full, everything, supply chain, finance, HR, and so forth. And, I think we had multiple pressures. One is that we really can't operate it in a sophisticated way and have real data and be able to have strong decision making if we're on so many different systems and processes and policies and so forth. So I would say, first and foremost, as an organization, we really needed to have more standards and more consistency, and we needed reliability, predictability. But I think secondly, we are a private equity-backed organization at this time, and so there's also that pressure to achieve some efficiency and to look at cost and to see where we can try to really perform at a higher level. So kind of all that came together. I'm sure we'll get into this as we talk more, but there's a tremendous amount of change that comes with that kind of complexity and competing objectives, because you really have to think through. You are trying to save money, you are trying to go fast, and you are trying to standardize all at the same time is a pretty major undertaking. But that's really what we were seeking for the organization to meet all those constituents' needs.
So those are obviously critical things and why the organizations undertook these things. But what was going on in HR that these projects were also going to help?
Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say that we had also a pretty distributed human resources model, and that is where we have hospitals, so each hospital really had its own ways of doing almost everything. And I've been in academic medical systems too, and I think it's actually quite similar, even when you're one organization, is that you have some pretty big functions that get to do things the way that they need to do them, whether that's pay practices, that's employment policies. It's just the way that they like to do things, and sometimes it's built around certain people who've been there a long time or whoever has influence. And we did not really think we could have the kind of traction and the kind of maturity in our human resources function until we could get our arms around that and actually align with our model of business partnering. So for those of you who do that kind of work, knowing that you can't really effectively business partner or support an organization if everybody's doing things differently. You just can't. There's no staff, no team that can take on all that variability. And so for us, it was a way for us to mature our own function was to have standard data, standard ways of doing our processes, and a way to teach our, growing HR community to do a great job on the ground and not spend every minute of their day on transactions or interpretations or, well, if it's on a Wednesday in this department and this is happening, this is how we treat it. So that's really inside human resources how we took it on.
I would say for us, we were really functioning as two independent HR departments. And so a big part of this project was the integration component and how do we bring our HR departments together and where do we feel that we need to provide an integrated service and where do we think that we need to align to the unique cultures that we each have and where we wouldn't maybe need to standardize. And so I think that's one of the things that we wrestled with quite a bit throughout the project, specifically around policy standardization. So we had to work through, probably 50 or more policies, and then we had practices and different guidelines and stuff as well that we needed to work through. And so I would say that was a big part of the work that we were doing. A lot of organizations will do kind of a phase 0 where they intentionally spend time focusing on doing all of that work ahead of kind of getting into the configuration and design and everything. And we ended up kind of taking that all on at once. So I think that was it was challenging and it was good and it allowed us to move quickly.
I was just going to add to that. You made me think about for organizations that also are trying to centralize, say, their recruitment support or their compensation center of expertise. It's really hard to do that when you have 16,000 job titles and job codes, which I know is the story of a lot of big places. You just can't take that on as sort of like a lean, mean central group if you have so much difference across your organization. So maybe.
Right. At the expense of asking you a question I never prepped you for, I am going to ask you one. So you mentioned something important, Carissa, that I think that would be valuable for people to hear. Not just the changes to the way you work, but also the shape of the work, meaning op model, the operating model in HR.
Yep.
So I know, because Tracy and I worked on it, worked on this together, and she worked very hard to shape her organization. If you both could comment on how you changed the organization itself and how you organized the people around the things that were coming as part of the transformation.
Yeah, so we had sort of transformed our HR operating model in 2019 when we went live in Wisconsin on Oracle. And so we were really looking to be able to bring our Northern Illinois region into our model. And so for them, I would say one of the biggest things was being able to offer a shared service center. So they had no type of employee shared service center. Their employees were still calling their HR business partners to get solutions. And so I do think that that was one of the real wins for that particular region. And so obviously, being on one system, being able to have the capabilities to answer questions, standardizing policies, all of that just makes that easier for us to be able to provide that service to the whole employee population. So I think that was really one of the things in terms of they were probably coming out of a less modern HR structure, if I may say, into a more modern structure with more focus on kind of strategic and value add as an HR partner.
Our model changed so fundamentally. It was like going from 0 to 200. And we too have a shared services model. We call it a business services function. And so we ended up taking roles, individuals from sites and moving them into this central function. And it wasn't just human resources, it's supply chain, it's payroll, it's onboarding, it's accounting, I'm trying to think, Jeff, almost every transactional function. So the model became that our human resources leads at our sites and whatever version you have, your big departments, getting them to that strategic level, which is everyone's goal, right? You want people to be influencing, building culture, strengthening your managers and so forth, not pushing paper and chasing things and just trying to interpret it all. So our model changed so fundamentally that those folks moved into this shared services group, and they did have to specialize more. So once we did that, you weren't a jack of all trades anymore, right? So you might be slotted into a payroll job or an onboarding processor or a data entry person where you were a generalist before. And people do have to make choices whether that's really for them. What we hoped for is that they would find it that the processes would make sense and it would be reliable and they could get a lot done and they would make great service for people. And for some, I think that happens, and for some, it's not the path that they want to be on. But we really, really changed that. And then ultimately, for my team, we call it people services in our organization, but the human resources function became a smaller, more strategic group. So we really aren't carrying the transactional work or running the machine of all of the processes, but we really are there to think, what's on the horizon? What are the trends? What are the best practices? What solutions can we design? What data can we analyze to see what direction we're headed? And it just immediately puts you in that position because we have just carved it out and we've moved that over. I think, however, in our model, what we're still having growing pains and trying to figure out is, people view me as accountable for functions that have now moved to this shared services center. I don't know the answer yet. Maybe that'll be a topic for next year.
Let's do it next year. Yeah.
And how to sort of navigate that and how to negotiate that and how to make sure that the standards and the SOPs are being met, yet people will come to you expecting you to solve the problem. So my bottom line answer is that our model has changed just completely overnight from moving to Oracle into the new process and designs, but still growing and learning.
Yeah, it's still warm.
Yes.
Let it cool off on the oven.
Yes.
So let's fast forward a little bit. So you've identified your case for change. You've identified the outcomes you're looking for. You've decided and funded the project. You need help, right? These are large projects. You want people who bring experience. You want software that's going to help you. How did you choose, us as PwC as a partner, but also, and maybe even more importantly, why did you choose Oracle? What things were available in the software that enabled those changes that you were looking to do? Carissa?
Yeah, I can say for us in 2019, we were probably viewed more as early adopters of Oracle, and it was really more around us making a strategic decision to be an early adopter. And the reason for that at the time was really around the data. So we're academic, and obviously we really want to have the data to be able to support decision making in our future growth. And so for us, it was just Oracle really being that engine around the data for us to be able to do what we need to do. And what was their second part to your question? Oh, I've got the most important part to this particular
Why are we
session.
here?
Why are we here? So for us, we really knew that we needed to go with a larger Big Four partner. I had experience with implementation in another employer where we had worked with PwC. For our organization, the criteria we were looking at is just the experience that PwC also brought, I would say. So they have a lot of experience with large integrations, integrating multiple healthcare systems, and they were able to help us with different benchmarks. They brought leading practices to us. Something that we were really looking for was someone who would push us outside of our comfort zone and kind of save us from ourselves, as I like to say. And PwC really brought that to the table for us.
Yeah, I wasn't at the organization when we chose Oracle, so I can't necessarily speak to how we got to that conclusion. But I can speak to choosing your partner, having done this also multiple times. And I think you have to know yourselves, and your organization needs to look in the mirror and really think about, what are you taking on? Are you planning to leave your model mostly as it is? Are people going to keep mainly the jobs that they have, although you don't always know that up front until you go through the process? Or do you expect to really, are you moving to a shared services model? Are you trying to course correct something organizationally about the way that you operate? So that sort of becomes like complexity number one. Are you also trying to save money? Are you trying to get a major efficiency return? Are you complex? Are you in many places? Are you 24/7? Do you also have a lot of different ways of doing things? And you just have to work your way through that so that as you are meeting with partners, you put that forward to them so they can really show you what they've done in that space, because it's no joke. Once you get down into this and you are designing and you are building, you need people who know what they're doing. And you will have that. There is tension, there is pushing back and forth, because, particularly if you have a multi-pronged objective, you will all be pushing on, hey, I'm really worried about change. I am very concerned about how people will react, whether they can adopt this, and will this even work, regardless if it looks beautiful and we have set it up. And I think you have to test whether or not your organization has, what's their fortitude for change, and do you have the right influencer? So if this is a finance-driven project, and yet you have to change everything for the people, do you have the right folks in place inside your organization who will be able to speak to it, move people along, lead them through change? Because a consulting firm alone can't do that. You need to have that partnership. And maybe my final thought about it, and I might be getting off track of how you choose the partner, but I think it's something to think about, is, do you have an internal person who can serve as that lead, who can really be the front facing? Because I think if you think of that as sort of a scale, the more complex it gets, the more you need someone inside who also can rally everyone and who can get decisions made. And you need to find a partner that you're going to be able to have that dance with, and that they hear you and they can adjust and they can continuously bring back new and different ways of thinking about it to get you to the finish line.
Well, we're definitely good dancers at PwC for sure. So we've talked about what you did, you've talked about why you did it, and we talked a little bit about the who just now. Let's talk about the how. Because the journey in the middle of it, like you said, Tracy, there's an evolving thing and there is some tension that's involved. So let's talk about governance a little bit. So it's so important to have not just your HR organizations as part of it and your IT organizations as part of it, but there are also reasons and importance for bringing the whole business, the whole organization along. So let's talk, and then Tracy, we'll start with you. Okay. How did you set up the governance? Who's involved, and why did you choose to set it up that way versus there were other options that you all had available?
Well, let me give you a lesson learned. I was on a previous implementation where the most senior leaders, the sponsors, understood that they were kind of the final say on things, but their schedules got busy. They couldn't come to the meetings. These projects cannot be done outside the meeting. This team the team that is designing and building it has to have answers so that they can leave that meeting and go actually build what needs to be built or tested or, whatever phase you're in. And I think the lesson learned and we did it pretty well. I think we had very engaged senior leaders, decision makers. I'm not saying every decision was easy to get to, but that knew that this was a meeting everybody went to every week. And we have the tools that help trigger and highlight what are the open issues, what is the last item that needs to be resolved. And so having governance on decision making is absolutely critical. Now, I've also been in several large academic medical systems, and I can say, you have a lot of informal voices and influencers who wouldn't typically sit at that table. But that table believes they've made a decision, and then slowly but surely, weeks and months later, or when you go out to start presenting change, it falls apart. And so you have to know that ahead of time and really build in all of the right checkpoints and keep testing about whether or not you have the strength to hold on the decisions that you've made. And you might sit here saying like, well, what are those decisions? But it's everything from, we're going to stop doing a certain type of transaction. We will no longer have this pay practice. And you think like, oh, well, we can just figure that as we go along. Well, not if you want your system to do it. It has to be put into the system as a process if you're actually going to achieve ultimately what you try to do. So governance in terms of the right leaders, but also the right subject matter experts. And having them, I'm thinking we almost had kind of like a secondary work group that would just continuously meet. And in fact, Jeff and his team would check in with me. I'm sure being a new head of human resources who's done this before, who kind of stepped into the middle of it. I had a lot of questions, I had concerns, and so they kept with me really close and checking in and making sure, like, was I going to come to the next meeting and I was going to be worried about something, and that could delay us for a couple of weeks if we didn't get that right. So hopefully, I think we found our way, on that.
Yeah, I can definitely give you the list of decisions that we thought we had a decision, and then we had to revisit. There were a few of those along the way. But I would say for us, the governance structure, it was really important for us that it did not feel like it was a Wisconsin takeover in Northern Illinois. So it was important that we had our CEO of Northern Illinois on our steering committee. We had all of our senior leaders from across the organization, practice, the various kind of shared services areas. They were all coming together so they would understand the value that this particular project would bring. And so we definitely had that group. They were very engaged, but being an academic medical center, we did have to spend a lot of time just talking about who are the people that we need to influence, how are we going to manage those key stakeholders. So there was a lot of coordination around who do we need to get to have the meeting before the meeting. And I really appreciated the partnership with PwC on that. We were able to really kind of talk through, okay, who is it that we need to get to? How do we want to approach those conversations? What are the options that are available to us so that we can have the options and the recommendations when engaging those individuals? And I think for us, that's really probably how we ended up being successful, was that key coordination of those stakeholders outside of the steering committee.
You just reminded me, I didn't say this, and maybe you wanted me to mention it, but we also put one of our site CEOs and a top nursing person on there. Boy, they keep you honest, right? Because they're right there in the field and they know, or on the ground, and they know whatever you're talking about will do. And that way you have somebody who is, giving you that operational perspective. You can lose that real quick when you have all these bright, shiny ways that you could do things, and you go, yeah, but how will we actually make sure that the emergency department is staffed if we make that change? And it forces people to talk about it. If I had to do it over, I'd probably have a few more operational leaders. I think we got a little tight because we need to manage it. Otherwise, and certainly in organizations where you're driving for a lot of consensus, it just can drag and drag. And the project has to move. It cannot operate the way that you normally operate for other activities and decisions in your organization. You have to hit the deadlines and so forth. So I would try to find that balance with a little bit more operational involvement, because I think there were people who later felt left out and could have been a champion, but they didn't understand it enough and they hadn't been part of the conversations. And you cannot underestimate how important that is for them to be able to look people in the eye and say, I was there. This is why we made that hard decision. We did make a trade-off. I'm sorry we couldn't do what you wanted. Because the people who are in that room, the project leaders and sometimes even the executives, they're just not going to have the same influence as someone who's on the ground to say to someone, I know you've done it that way for 10 years. I'm going to need to ask you to do it this way instead. And it's going to make us all better. So maybe think a little bit about that ops involvement.
Yeah, and so let's think about the day-to-day a little bit too, as leaders, as people who are accountable for the change and actually going to have to live with it afterwards. How did you balance staying close enough to it, but also allowing the teams to actually operate? Because it's really important for them to be able to move, but you need to understand what you're going to be left with and how it's progressing, and are the requirements being met? I don't know, Carissa, do you want to start?
Yeah, it's a struggle to find the right balance. So we were really wanting to empower our people to be able to make decisions throughout the project. And so that was one of our guiding principles, was to be able to empower them, allow that decision making to happen closest to the work. I think, we have a great team and they knew when to escalate. We really took the philosophy of, escalate quickly. We tend to have a culture that is going to escalate, so we said, let's just escalate quickly and get everything out on the table so we can work through it. I think that was really helpful for us as we moved through, the different phases of the project. So that was probably one of the things.
I would say because we are so distributed and had literally 1,000 ways to do everything. We didn't quite have that situation where we could sort of have everybody, give their vote or their take. I have been in organizations where we used almost a voting or a pulsing on certain things, where we could have option A or option B, and I think that can be really effective. But sometimes the speed at which you need to move or the complexity that you're dealing with won't allow you to do as much of that. So then it's just, frequent updating and testing things with people and asking more like, what will you do knowing this is the change? How should we be prepared? Who should we talk to? Just sort of pivoting that with them. I'm sure most organizations use some form of change champion, some, folks who are in the department. I think it's always hard to find the right people with the right influence and the amount of time that it really takes to do that effectively. But you can use that group to capture sort of reaction to concepts and decide whether or not some things are worth the squeeze, so to speak. But at the same time, you start to build them up as sort of the go-to. They know what's happening. They know why we got there.
Right.
And so you may not get everybody involved to tell you what they want and be able to respond to it, but you can get them informed and excited about where you're going.
So maybe a two-parter as we close out a little bit more about the how. There are things, we talked about the operating model, we talked about how you're going to change about the way you do business, but there are probably some things that you learned along the way as you did the project that you want to continue doing. You're like, I hadn't thought about this, but I'd like to keep doing this. And what are maybe some things that you would change? You certainly don't want to do this again, not anytime soon, but what are some of the things that you would change about the way you went about it or the way you were thinking about it now that you have a chance to kind of, with a little bit of perspective, I know it's months, not years, but looking back, what would you do differently?
I think one of the things that worked well for us was really making sure Northern Illinois was heavily engaged. And so there was about a point halfway through the project where we did need to make sure that we were having the level of engagement that we needed. Part of that was just because we didn't want it to look like it was, Wisconsin coming and taking over. You'll be doing things sort of this way. And so making sure that we had an expert in Wisconsin, an expert in Northern Illinois, and then our PwC expert was really something I think that worked quite well for us. I think we'll continue to do that where we can, bringing those cultures and different HR functions together. So that was one thing I would say worked very, very well for us. If I were to go back and wave a magic wand, I think everybody would say resources. So we underestimated the amount of resources, which is very, very common. I think, part of that was probably because we as Wisconsin, we were already on the system, so we probably had a little bit of like, well, this will be much different than when we were, because we already have one particular region on the system. But I would say that we ended up having our project resources maintain their day-to-day responsibilities. And I have been on projects where it's been done both ways. You're able to carve out your project resources, you can assign them to the project, you can free them from any of their day-to-day responsibilities. I definitely think that is a leading practice. I think the fact that our individuals, small region, Northern Illinois, they're wearing many hats, they're doing a lot of the work wouldn't have gotten done if we didn't have them doing the project and some of their day-to-day responsibilities. So we had to adjust on the fly throughout the project to make sure that we were able to reprioritize certain items. We were able to offer them some protected times and things like that so that we were able to make sure that we could hit the milestone.
Yeah, I'll start with the resource part of it too. I would say lesson learned, having previously been in an organization that chose to double up. Everyone on the project had their role and everyone had their regular role. We did not have maybe the luxury or the insight to do that. We had a 2-year implementation, which is very accelerated, and it's not sustainable to have people do their job and do the project. However, it's also really hard on the people who run the functions to give it up to somebody else, and I've seen that. There's just a ton of tension there because they know why they do it, and they know what we need, and they have to own it afterwards, and letting go, or at least being sort of like the secondary to it, not being in all the project design, it's very hard, but you will save your people. And if you have good people, you will save them because there's a very high likelihood of burnout if you have to do 2 jobs, and you are in the end not saving yourself anything if your folks are like, I can't even be here at the end of this because I've done too much. Because projects are heavy hours and heavy effort there. But I'll swap it over to the things that we have adopted because of the project that I think are great. A lot of discipline and governance around when we're going to add new codes, when we're going to add new jobs, how data is defined, all the things that we just sort of like let happen before. We built in the structures that came through the project structures that we're going to keep using so that we don't find ourselves again with 16,000 job titles, or this business line or this division or this hospital has decided to use data or define data this way. We really have put it through that funnel. So far, so good. I think people appreciate that we actually now know what it means instead of like, well, it means this in this place and this in this place. So we're going to adopt those, and I'm hoping we keep that alive and long-term any check-in in a few years, and we still have standards.
That's awesome. You guys mentioned the resource thing. That's probably the number one thing we tell every client we go to, and nobody believes us. It is amazing.
Believe it.
It is amazing. It is amazing. So I think they'd drum me out of the consulting union if I didn't ask you about AI. So first and foremost, what do you prefer about Oracle's Llama 4 Maverick model versus other large language models? Someone's like, can you comment on it? No, I'm just kidding. So from an AI perspective, you all started your journeys really before AI was almost a thing. I mean, obviously it existed, but it wasn't big, and Oracle's been, exploding in terms of what it offers. So talk a little bit about, as you started to introduce it, and what things are you looking forward to, not just about the software, but like how you're going to do business in the future, thinking about AI.
I'll just say it's unfolding, right? We just finished going live with our last group October 1st. So we're learning what we can use AI to do. We had an interesting issue that we needed help with, and PwC and Oracle helped us do that, which is that we have jobs in many states, and as we were so excited to consolidate and get down to a certain number of jobs, what we missed in that process was there were certain state requirements, licensures, and so we really couldn't have we needed them by state, and that's enormous. We're all across the country. We have a lot of jobs and a lot of people. So we used AI tool to try to get that cleaned up quickly and make sure that we were in compliance. So that's one easy example. And I think we will continue to see whether it's analyzing insights that we're now starting to get as we can see things across our whole organization. And as we plug in different components, whether that's learning or that's performance, I expect we'll see a little bit of AI being incorporated there. And certainly that shared services group, which is doing more of the transactions, that's obviously not in my space anymore, but they'll be using AI to really monitor their processes and their activities and ensuring that they are hitting those marks and getting people on the job on time and having a great experience.
Yeah. So for us, our approach with AI is obviously to augment our people resources. I think you'll hear that from many. We're not new in that space. But we really were looking for how we can leverage AI for scaling different workflows, for helping to take the pain and just the problems out of our employees' day-to-day work. And then I would also say the overall employee experience. So one of the AI components that we just implemented, that's probably one of the first that I would say is more forward-facing to all of our end users and employees, was really around the goal setting process. So as we have gone on our journey, we actually had a hiatus from performance reviews. We went live, then we were in the middle of COVID, and so we just implemented the performance management stuff probably about 2 years ago. And so we had to kind of retrain our people around annual reviews and goal setting. And so we actually really wanted to be able to leverage this functionality. We thought it would be really good for our people to be able to set goals and help them. We were a little worried, actually, because we needed to go through our own kind of internal governance process. And so we wrestled with taking it forward to our AI committee, who's looking for things like responsible use, ethics, risk, does it align with obviously our strategic vision, what's the ROI, all of those things. And so I partnered with our IT colleagues, and we really built the business case for how we felt this would help with the overall employee experience. And we were able to launch it. We just put it into place for our annual review process this year, and the feedback has been outstanding. I mean, goals are goals. Not everybody loves setting their goals, and the employees have just been really, really appreciative of us having that tool to really help them with setting their meaningful goals.
Awesome. And you'll get more and more opportunity as it goes. We've talked about change and the impact of change throughout this entire process, but not just the change for itself, but the adoption. You mentioned how the experience the users had with the AI. What are you doing and what have you done to help people adopt the change and the experience you want them to have versus letting it just organically happen and then you kind of react to it? Let's talk about that a little bit, Carissa.
Yeah, we've been really forward thinking in the space of AI. We're fortunate we're in an innovative organization, so we've chosen to really just kind of come out head on with our employees and really have our strategy around it's not to take away jobs, it's to help you with your kind of day-to-day activities so that we can have you working on more strategic work, more important work. And I think it's all in how you're messaging with your people. And then what we're trying to do is find quick wins, right? We don't need to boil the ocean with this. Let's get a couple of quick wins under our belt, show how we can add value similarly to what we have just done. I was in a session yesterday where somebody said, we asked people, what do you dislike the most about your job? And if we can get at those particular pieces and then, affect some change, I think that's how we start to build the buy-in and the trust from our people. And so that's really how we're choosing to kind of go after implementing AI.
I'm thinking a little bit about the adoption piece, and it's challenging. Depending on your workforce, and your people, and sort of, are they sitting at computers all day? Are they on their feet, not using computers? How do they normally learn new material? And you'll have a team that's put together the most amazing training and job aids, but you know what? Until you're in the middle of something you need to do, it's really hard to remember that, and people get impatient. And in our situation, they're taking care of humans and patients who are sick, and they don't really have time to go read a job aid. And so that's frustrating to them. And we're always in that balance of like, oh, we wrote this beautiful process of how to do this. Here's the link, you could go read it. And they're looking at you like, are you crazy? So it's something we grapple with, which is how to get that adoption. In particular, and this was one of the lessons learned that I promised that I was going to mention, is self-service is amazing, but self-service requires a huge amount of change management. So you can jazz it up, you can name it what you want, you will get the reaction that it feels like more work for them. Now, I probably, over 20 years, I've had to have the self-service conversation, and it's everything from, but by the time you write it down, or you send an email, or you ask a person, you could have clicked the 3 buttons to get it done. It's still, you just got to work people into it, and you have to give them, the incentive of a great process or outcome to make that happen. But I will just say we had some practical, tactical things that we did. Office hours, everybody gets on Teams, so all of the human resources leads, we have a call, they're having, I don't know if they're still.
Every day,
now it's every day for this wave.
Every day.
But get it all out, have people show you on the screen, and just don't underestimate that people do need that attention. And if you build your project and your change group to just deliver these materials, that will not hit the mark. You have to do something that's more broad. And of course, you do have to teach people on the ground how to do it as well, and we do have our leads there, but it needs to be pretty comprehensive. And I will believe we will do a lot of reinforcing over the next couple of years, not only because people they don't have time to learn it, their jobs have changed a lot. There's a lot of overwhelm of learning how to do everything. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, for us, we don't have folks they do computer jobs, so to speak. They're really doing other kinds of jobs, and this is something that they have to go think about differently.
Right, and it's really interesting, and maybe sharing one more thing that you guys, or 2 more things you guys did really well. At Go Live, you all actually sent people out to the sites, and so that people could come to a command center and ask questions, and it was really, really helpful. But the other thing that I've really noticed is that people have the opportunity to engage the way they need to. So you've created different mediums for people to engage. So they have the office hours, they have the walk-ups, they have the material, so they can self-serve, and you designed an entire process around that, which I think has allowed for the different modalities of the way people can get help, because all hours, all day, all days, all ways.
In fact, I was just sitting here thinking, I wonder if AI won't end up being a really good tool for this as a way to condense the information or create better visuals, and or maybe it's animated things just that make the learning easier, and just to get it to the user faster and better.
Yeah, well, I got a great picture of myself that makes me look 40 pounds lighter and 20 years younger,
there you go.
It probably can. So I want to leave some time for questions, but I just want to ask you guys, as you think about it, some of this is fresh, you're months out from the big changes, but what's next? I mean, this is not the end, this is actually the beginning, right? So what are you guys thinking about next? Tracy, you want to?
We did not go live with our performance, so I'm so excited. I think I'm going to come take a visit with you. That'll be next. We also sort of went to a modified way of doing performance evaluations, and we'll want to use what's in Oracle. In fact, the team did design some of it. We just didn't turn it on. We just had too much change going on. And then our learning management system. That's probably our last piece to open up and start using. We have, I think, 3 or 4 systems, and we need to move them all into one. So excited for that to come. And who knows? We'll just keep unlocking things every day that we discover.
Yeah, I would say for us, I think AI. So I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say that after being here at AI World. We'll really be looking at how we can continue to implement. I'm excited. I've been seeing kind of what's on the roadmap for 2026, so we'll be looking at that. The other thing, just to kind of piggyback with what you were saying, so there are some self-service items that we did not turn on when we went live several years ago, so we will be going back and looking at maybe now is the time. Timing's everything. And so we'll be looking at how we can continue to balance that offering and empowering people to be able to do that work whenever they would like to do it versus having to have a more manual process and rely on our individuals behind the scenes in HR to do that transactional stuff. So those are some of our focus areas.
I'm kind of excited about something you mentioned earlier today, which is I think Oracle is launching an AI tool for around the position management or the hierarchy. And I did say this to you this morning. Hierarchy is the most important thing you can do in any of these projects. You absolutely have to know who really reports to who, because every single thing hinges on that. And you will have folks who will tell you, I can't bother them with that. I need, one person to be responsible for 100 people. You cannot make org charts. You cannot contact the managers of certain people. You can't have your approvals correct. So I will just say to you that if there is one thing you can do at the very start is get everybody on board on why the correct hierarchy in your system drives everything. Your engagement survey, you name it. So I don't know a lot about it, but I'm excited to hear that there is a tool coming that will help you identify where you're missing supervisors or where your hierarchy's off and your
Well, and you guys came from 4 different systems, so I can attest to the fact that it was really hard just getting it in a form.
Yes.
But now there's a lot of correction and need
Yeah.
for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions for our esteemed colleagues here. What would you like to know that we didn't talk about? What are the things that are on your mind for your organization? I'm going to start calling on people if you don't.
Don't be shy.
So I have a question about change management. Can you talk a little bit about So for testing, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
So for change management, where does the team that does the work, where do they sit in your organization? And how do you make sure that they're a part of all of these initiatives and projects and that you have enough people?
That is a great question. So we have change management that actually sits in our IS function and our HR function. And so they need to be intimately involved in the project. So we had a specific change management work stream where we were able to have individuals that were then engaged in each of the different initiatives. So we had a change management individual that was dedicated just to HR and all of the different changes that we were going through. We had one for finance, one for supply chain, and that's really how we were able to manage it. Our resources in that space are fairly lean, so we did rely pretty heavily on our partner with PwC to help us navigate that.
Yeah, and you won't be surprised to hear many organizations don't have a change management department or that they view it as more project management. And I will really urge you that if you find yourself putting project management on change management, that will not be sufficient. They certainly will know how to mechanically push out things and what the structures and the tools are, but you do need people who understand the psychology of the change management, of adoption, of leading through change, and I would really encourage you to do that. So in our case, we did not have a change management function, nor was it really very mature out of our OD area, and just by design, it just wasn't there. So we did stand up with PwC a change management team, and we will incorporate part of those folks into the human resources function going forward, and we will consult with any area of the organization, whether or not it's a technical implementation or something else that we're doing to change work. But you all know that's the deal breaker. That's really when these things fall apart, is when your people are not on board or your leaders don't know how to influence. And so don't go on the cheap there. Make sure that you really get the right support.
It's important. What other questions? We're pretty close to time. Go ahead, Jess.
For self-service. So one of the challenges that we have is manager self-service, and we also have a lot of people that support the leadership, and so it makes it very hard from a hierarchy perspective to implement the manager self-service because you can't delegate it to someone else. Mm-hmm. How did you get your leaders on board to doing it themselves?
Have we?
Hence why that's a focus area for us.
You always have those adopters who they get it. They go and they get it done. And I will say, sometimes I do that, well, so-and-so's figured it out. Let's, and even I will say, let me just come by your office and sit with you and just show you. You can do this in 3 minutes. By the time you ask someone to put in a ticket to do this, to do that, you're going to feel so much control and you're going to see what you need to see. It's a journey. I don't think there's any way to do it. There are some delegation workarounds that you can do. I don't think we promote those widely, but there are certainly roles in your organization that there's no way that they are going to put those in, and that's not the hill you want to die on, right? But start early, start often, and just keep selling the benefits of using it. And you can't do that alone either. You have to have your other executives and your other leaders go, oh, here, I know how to do it. Let me show you. It's not bad.
The amount of concierge service in your organization before you started this project, it was a long way. People had to get used to doing it themselves, right?
Well, that's nothing like academic medical centers. It's a real concierge, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, I think that's the sign.
Yeah.
They took our pictures off the screen.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you,
I hope
everyone.
this was helpful. Thank you all.